Okay, now. So today we have to discuss one more topic, that is different factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis. Till now, as you know, we have discussed about the light reaction and dark reaction, right? So now we shall discuss what are the different factors that will affect the photosynthesis. So two factors are there. First is internal factors, or I can say the plant factors. And second is external factors. As the name suggests, internal factors are the factors that are present inside the body of the plant. They are due to the genetic makeup of the plant. Am I clear? So, and if I talk about the external factors, external means the factors that are present outside the plant body and they are affecting the photosynthesis which is being done by the plant. Now, if I talk about the internal factors, as you know, leaves are there. Leaves are having mesophyll cells. In the mesophyll cells, chloroplast is present. In the chloroplast, chlorophyll is present. And this chlorophyll will help in the process of photosynthesis. This you know. Plant is there, right? So basically, internal factors. First internal factor is size of the leaf. Now just think, if a leaf is of this size and there is a second leaf which is of this size, in which leaf the process of photosynthesis would be more? It's an obvious answer. In first leaf, the process of photosynthesis would be more. So first internal factor is the size of the leaf. If the size of the leaf is big, then obviously the rate of photosynthesis would be more. And if the surface area of the leaf is somewhat less, then the photosynthesis would be less. So first internal factor is size of the leaf. Second internal factor is number of the chloroplast. As you can see, in the leaf we are having mesophyll cells, and in the mesophyll cells we are having chloroplast. And number of chloroplasts present in a cell differs. Clear? Suppose here I am having a leaf. In this leaf I am having mesophyll cells. Suppose here I have grown mesophyll cells. This we can see via microscope only. Okay. So in this, suppose mesophyll cells, we are having chloroplast. So here, suppose I am having 5 chloroplasts. This is just an hypothesis. Am I audible, class? Okay, as I was giving you example of the number of chloroplast. Firstly, I told you the shape of the size of the leaves will affect the process of photosynthesis. Second factor, second internal factor is number of the chloroplast. Suppose this leaf is having 10 chloroplast. I'm saying this is a hypothetical number. Okay. Suppose this leaf is having 10 chloroplast in the mesophyll cells. And here I am having the second leaf of the same size. But in this leaf, in the mesophyll cell, we are having 20 chloroplasts. So can you tell me in which leaf the photosynthesis would be more? The leaf having 10 chloroplasts or the leaf having 20 chloroplasts? Your answer would be second leaf. So here comes the second factor, number of the chloroplast. Am I clear? Third internal factor, you can just see from here. In the chloroplast, as you know, chlorophyll is present. So if the amount of chlorophyll in a leaf is more, then again the photosynthesis will be more in that leaf. And if the amount of chlorophyll in a leaf is less, then the photosynthesis would be less. Suppose again I'm having two leaves, both are of same size, same shape, having same number of chloroplast. But if I see in the chloroplast, in the first leaf, the chlorophyll is less. But in the second leaf, the chlorophyll is more. So now in which leaf the process of photosynthesis would be more? Your answer will be the leaf second. So these are a few internal factors, say size of the leaf, shape of the leaf also, orientation of the leaf also. Now how orientation affects, just see. Generally you have seen leaves are placed like this. If I'll talk about a stem, leaves are like this, so that the sunlight can fall directly, so that they can absorb the maximum amount of sunlight that is required by them. As you know, in photosynthesis, sunlight is required. Now, suppose a leaf is oriented like this. Now, this area is exposed to sunlight. So, this area is capturing the sunlight. Earlier, the leaf was at this position. The orientation of the leaf was like this. So, the sunlight was falling on this much area. But if the orientation is like this, then the sunlight will fall on this area. So in which case the photosynthesis would be less when the orientation is like this. So generally you have seen also the orientation of the leaves is like this only. If this is the stem, then leaves are like this only. Am I clear? So these are the internal factors. Size of the leaf, shape of the leaf, number of the chloroplast, amount of the chlorophyll, orientation of the leaves, even orientation of the mesophyll cells. You know, in the leaves, mesophyll cells are present. Mesophyll cells are arranged in two different ways. There is a question also in your NCERT. Is there any change in the arrangement of mesophyll cells? Its answer is yes. Actually, what happens? Suppose the sunlight is quite adequate, even it is intense. Suppose the sunlight is highly intense. That intense sunlight is not required by the plant because excess of anything is also harmful. Now suppose the sunlight is in excess amount. So now what will happen? The chlorophyll, what will they do? They will align themselves perpendicular to the surface of the leaf. Leaf is there, like leaf is there. Now the mesophyll cells, they will align themselves like this, perpendicular, so that they can receive the optimum amount of light. And suppose if the sunlight is quite low, sunlight is low, now the plant wants more sunlight. So how the mesophyll cells will arranged? In this case, the mesophyll cells will be arranged parallel. Suppose here is the leaf. In the leaf, the mesophyll cells will be arranged parallel so that they can absorb the maximum amount of sunlight. So these are a few internal factors. Now let us move to the external factors, means how the factors of the outside surrounding affect the rate of photosynthesis. Before that, if there is any doubt in the internal factor, let me know in the chat box. I'll explain that factor once again. Okay, I'm explaining the last point once again. Suppose the sunlight is quite intense. There is intense sunlight. Now listen one thing. Plant needs optimum sunlight. Optimum means a certain value where the process of photosynthesis is maximum. If the sunlight will be more than that, the optimum value, it will harm the plant. So what happens basically? Suppose here I'm having the leaves. In the leaves, you know, mesophyll cells are present. So they will rearrange themselves on the basis of the light. Suppose the light is intense. As the light is intense, so they want to absorb the optimum value only. They do not want to absorb the whole sunlight. They just want to absorb the optimum value. So now the mesophyll cells, they will arrange themselves perpendicularly like this. They will arrange themselves perpendicularly. Am I clear? So in the intense sunlight, mesophyll cells, how are they arranged? They are arranged perpendicularly to the wall of the cells. So they are arranged perpendicularly. Am I clear? Now, if you want to know the reason why they are arranged perpendicularly, as after being arranged perpendicularly, their surface area which is exposed to light will decrease. Just imagine, mesophyll cells ऐसे खड़ा है या ऐसे. Sunlight किस area में ज़्यादा आएगी? Just imagine, sunlight is coming. If they are arranged like this, parallel, then sunlight will come on this area. So they will absorb more light. And if they are arranged perpendicularly like this, then sunlight will come on this area, this circle. Here, they will absorb the less light. Now here you can see the sunlight is already intense. They just want to absorb the optimum light that is required by them. So they will arrange themselves perpendicularly like this. Am I clear? And suppose if the sunlight is low due to any reason, okay. Now suppose the sunlight is low. Now just think, if the sunlight is low, now the plant again wants optimum light. So it means now what will happen instead of this? The mesophyll cells will arrange parallelly like this, so that surface area will increase and now they can absorb the maximum amount of sunlight. So now the mesophyll cells will arrange parallelly like this. So now they can absorb the maximum sunlight. So now in this case, mesophyll cells will be parallel to the cells of the leaves. Along the sides of the leaves, along the side walls of the leaves, they will be arranged parallel in the dim light, and they will be arranged perpendicularly in the intense light. Any doubt in this point? Again, let me know. Otherwise, I'll move to the external factors. So now, let me talk about the external factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis. Okay. External, as the name suggests, the factors that are outside the plant body. How will they affect the rate of photosynthesis? You know the different factors you have done in earlier classes also. Light is affecting photosynthesis. One by one, we shall discuss all these factors. First factor, as you know, light affects photosynthesis. Second factor, as you know, CO2 is also required for the process of photosynthesis. So CO2 concentration, it also affects the rate of photosynthesis. How they are affecting, we'll discuss now. Okay, now third factor is temperature. Temperature also affects the photosynthesis. Next, as you know, water is also required for photosynthesis. So water is again a factor that is affecting. Fifth factor, the different kind of minerals. How, why, we shall discuss. There are different kind of minerals. And last, different kind of chemicals. Now let us discuss about these factors one by one. Firstly, let us talk about the light factor. As you know, for the process of photosynthesis, plants need light. Basically, they are using the sunlight. And if I talk about the light, they are just using visible spectrum of the sunlight. Visible spectrum, you know, Vibgyor. Plants can use only this spectrum, Vibgyor. That's it. its wavelength, I guess it varies from 380 to 700 nanometer. So basically plants can absorb the light of this much wavelength, 380 to 700 nanometer. Somewhat variation is there in between. Clear? So now let me talk about the light as an external factor. Plants, they will take the sunlight. As you know, the major source of energy on the earth is sun only. So plants, they used to take the light from the sun, that is solar radiation. Now if I talk about the light, then the sunlight or the normal light also, it is having three components or three factors basically. Light intensity, how intense the light is. Energy per unit area, how intense the light is. Second is quality. What is the quality of light, or rather I can say what is the wavelength of the light. And last is duration. Duration is very much easier to understand. Duration means time. Okay, now let us study about these one by one. If I talk about the intensity, now just think, if the light will be more intense, then according to you the photosynthesis will be more. So, and if the intensity is low, then photosynthesis will be low. This is our general assumption that we can say. So if I talk about the intensity of light, then I can write, if the intensity is low, low intensity, so it basically means low photosynthesis, right? And if there will be higher intensity, then photosynthesis will be higher. But this is true, no doubt, but only at a certain point. Why? Just before that, let me tell you about the limiting factor. Okay? What is limiting factor? As I told you about photosynthesis, we require so many things. Water is required, CO2 is required, sunlight is required, right? So basically what is law of limiting factor? This law was given by Blackman in 1905. Actually what he said that if in a reaction many substances are involved, if in a reaction many substances are involved, then rate of the reaction will be determined by the factor which is in minimum quantity. I am again speaking, in a reaction when many substances are involved, then the rate of the reaction is determined by that substance which is in minimum amount. Now let me explain you. Suppose एक plant है, उस plant के पास CO2 enough है, sunlight भी enough है, temperature भी अच्छा है, that is required for the growth of the plant. But there is no water. Maybe there is no rainfall, so that plant is not having water. Suppose here I am having a plant, it is having proper CO2. Okay, proper sunlight, proper temperature is there, everything is proper except for the one thing, water. Due to less rainfall or due to any reason, the plant is not having adequate water. So, will the rate of photosynthesis be affected? Or be the photosynthesis will be normal? Yes, the photosynthesis will be affected. No doubt CO2 is adequate, sunlight is adequate, everything is adequate except water. But still, the rate of photosynthesis is affected. So here, the substance which is at its minimum value, सबसे कम value पे कौन है? Water. So here water is the rate determining factor, or I can say water is the limiting factor. अगर बाकी के सारे फैक्टर अच्छे हैं, एक फैक्टर लिमिटिंग है, फोटोसिंथेसिस का रेट अफेक्ट होगा ही होगा. So this is limiting factor low. If so many substances are involved, then if a particular substance is at its minimum value, then that particular substance will act as a limiting factor. Means वो कहीं ना कहीं उस process को धीरे करेगा, और मे भी अगर वो substance है ही नहीं तो वो photosynthesis can even stop. Am I clear? Now let us move to the factor. So as you know, we were discussing the first factor, that is light. In light, I told you three things we have to study: intensity of light, quality of light, duration of light. So firstly, I was telling you intensity of light. As our assumption says, if the light will be more intense, the photosynthesis will be more. If the light will be less intense, the photosynthesis is less. Yes, this is true, but at a certain point. याद रखना, हमारी बॉडी को, प्लांट को, हर एक चीज को एक ऑप्टिमम वैल्यू तक चीज चाहिए. अगर वो चीज ऑप्टिमम वैल्यू से ज्यादा हो जाए, दैट इज अगेन हार्मफुल. और अगर वो ऑप्टिमम वैल्यू से कम है, दैट इज लिमिटिंग. दैट आई टोल्ड यू. नाउ सपोज in low intensity photosynthesis is low, fine. Here the light will be limiting factor. Now if I talk about the higher intensity, now what will happen? Let me show you with a graph. Here I am having a graph. Here I am drawing light intensity and their rate of photosynthesis. Now it is but obvious, if light will increase, intensity of light will increase, the photosynthesis will increase. So I can draw it like this. Light is increasing, photosynthesis is also increasing, but to a certain level. Suppose here, इस लेवल तक तो होगा, लाइट बढ़ी, इंटेंसिटी बढ़ी, फोटोसिंथेसिस बढ़ेगा ही बढ़ेगा, बट एक पॉइंट पे क्या हो जाएगा? सैचुरेशन. व्हाई? बिकॉज बाकी के फैक्टर दे विल बी लिमिटिंग. CO2 नेचर में 0.03% है, दैट इज लिमिटिंग फैक्टर. क्लियर? 0.03% CO2 is a limiting factor for the plant. अब सनलाइट तो बढ़ती जा रही है, but what about others? Water limiting है, CO2 is limiting. So at this point, what will happen? The graph will become constant. Means इस point पे अगर sunlight बढ़ भी रही है, the photosynthesis will remain same. That's what I want to say. If light intensity is low, no doubt photosynthesis will be low. If light intensity is high, photosynthesis is high to a certain level. Like you can see, light intensity is increasing. As a result, photosynthesis is also increasing. But at a particular point, saturation will reach. And after this point, no matter if the sunlight will be increased, then the graph will remain like this only. Means now increase in the light intensity is not having any effect on photosynthesis. Am I clear? Decrease in light intensity, decrease in photosynthesis. Increase in light intensity to a certain level, increase in photosynthesis. Now increase in light intensity after that level, the photosynthesis won't be affected, because now the other factors, CO2, water, they will be act as limiting in nature. चाहे आप water दे भी दो, CO2 नहीं दे सकते, that is in the air only, वो limiting factor act करेगी ही करेगी, because CO2 is 0.03% in nature. Clear? Now one more thing. Suppose I am not in my hands, but suppose the sunlight is being increased to a certain level, beyond that certain level. So now what will happen? The graph will move like this. Why? अगर CO, अगर फोटो, अगर sunlight बहुत ही ज्यादा level से ज्यादा बढ़ जाएगी, now the photosynthesis will decrease. Why? Because as I told you, excess of everything is harmful, even for us, even for the plants. If there would be excess sunlight, what that excess sunlight will do, it will degrade the chlorophyll. If there is excess sunlight, then the chlorophyll, it will be destroyed. And result you can imagine, if the chlorophyll is destroyed, then ultimately photosynthesis will be affected. affected. Am I clear? So lower in the light intensity, lower in the photosynthesis. Higher in the light intensity to a certain point, the photosynthesis will increase. After that certain point, the photosynthesis become stable. Basically, if I'll talk about in the percentage, then plant used to get saturate at 10% of the full light. If sunlight is there, plant will take only 10% of that. If full sunlight is there, the plant will get saturate only at 10% level. After that, if the sunlight will keep on increasing, doesn't matter. The plants are not going to take that sunlight. Am I clear with this first factor, light intensity? Now let me talk about the quality of light. Quality, I think you understand. Basically, here quality stands for the wavelength. So second factor is quality of light. Quality here stands for the wavelength, and we have discussed one experiment earlier. In the blue light and in the red light, the photosynthesis is maximum. And even if I have to select between these two, then in the red light, the photosynthesis is maximum. So out of Vibgyor, देखिए Vibgyor के बाहर कोई भी radiation हो, photosynthesis नहीं होगा. Photosynthesis will take place only in this area, because the chlorophyll pigment and the rest accessory pigments, they can trap only this much radiation. They can absorb the wavelength of only this much radiation. So suppose Vibgyor is there. As I told you, the blue region and the wavelength of the red region is being absorbed by the chlorophyll mostly. So these two regions are there where the photosynthesis is maximum. And in the green region, the photosynthesis is minimum. I'm just talking about the higher plants. In lower plants and in the algae, you will see the variation. So in quality, am I clear? Quality basically means that the photosynthesis will be maximum in the red and blue light. If I have to select between red and blue, then red is the better option. In MCQ, you have to select sometimes. So red light is the light where the photosynthesis is maximum, and green light is the light where the photosynthesis is minimum. And why? It all depends upon the wavelength. Because chlorophyll pigment, rest pigments, they are having an absorption peak. Okay, and they have absorption peak at this wavelength, especially in the algae. So this is quality of light. Now, third, as I told you, duration of light. I think this is clearly understood by you. Duration means time. If the plant will be exposed to light for longer period of time, then photosynthesis would be more. And if the plant will be exposed to sunlight for lesser period of time, then photosynthesis would be less. Normally, if I talk about the normal range, then a plant needs at least 10 to 12 minutes, sorry, 10 to 12 hours to be exposed to the sunlight. Clear? Now, any doubt in first external factor, that is light, light intensity, quality, and last one is duration of light. Any doubt in first factor? So now let me move to the second factor, that is concentration of CO2. Again, as our understanding says, as I told you, in the nature we are having 0.03% CO2 by volume, and generally it acts as a limiting factor. Why? Because its composition is small and the photosynthesis is maximum at 0.02, 0.05%. The experiments have been conducted in the laboratory, and when the scientists provided 0.05% of CO2 to the plants, then they observed that the photosynthesis was maximum. So here in the nature they are having 0.03%. So CO2 is always a limiting factor. It can come in one mark. Which out of the following is a limiting factor always? Its answer is CO2. Now let us talk about the increase or decrease in CO2. How will it affect the photosynthesis? Again, we can say increase in the CO2 amount will increase the photosynthesis, and decrease in the CO2 amount will decrease the photosynthesis. Again, at a certain level. If the photosynthesis, if CO2 is less, this is for less suppose, then photosynthesis will also be less. And if CO2 is more, then photosynthesis will also be more. But again, I'm saying at a certain point. That point is optimum level. If the CO2 will be more than that point, may 0.05% तक CO2 है तो yes healthy plant photosynthesis है. But अगर CO2 उस level से बहुत आगे चलेगी, now what will happen? It will be a toxic substance. It will act as a toxic substance to the plant. Excess of okay. Draw the graph. Again, here I am drawing CO2 concentration, their rate of photosynthesis. Again, as you know, if the CO2 will increase, then photosynthesis will increase, and after that, it will become stable. It will not increase. But if the CO2 concentration is increased beyond that level also, then what will happen? It will act as a toxic substance to the plant. Plant may die, or some kind of abnormal situations could arise. So any doubt in CO2 concentration? Who is having the doubt? Prachi, unmute yourself and take your doubt. We are left with 1-2 minutes only. Prachi, take your doubt fastly.
Ma'am, I want to ask that all the factors affecting photosynthesis are directly proportional to it, or there is any factor which is inversely proportional also?
Yes, there is a factor like chemicals. If the chemicals will be more, photosynthesis would be less.
Yes, ma'am.
Otherwise, normally the factors are directly proportional, but at a certain point. After that point, they will be inversely proportional. Light is directly proportional, but still at a particular point. CO2 is directly proportional, but still at a particular point. Water is also. Generally, yes, all the factors are directly proportional.
Okay, ma'am.
Any other query? Okay. So if I talk about the third factor, that is temperature. We are not having enough time. Let me start. If